So, time for a little bit more of a human experience lesson. The last one was a little bit of a mix of theories of violence and entrepreneurship. And I know it's not materialism or the other lesson that you asked for, Thibaut, but I'm coming. I need to do a bit of research for those first. So, this lesson is looking a little bit at who is the world built for, as it says on the screen. Looking into a few different areas um, where perhaps we're lacking in our intersectional way of traveling through the world. So, the first thing I would like you to do is you look at this question and what to brain dump, so not control yourself, edit your thoughts, just let everything out on who is the world built for. And if you're not quite finished, you can press pause so you can continue to share those ideas. You can also just do it as a discussion. And what are the types of things? So if I think about, okay, who is the world built for? White people, wealthy people, men, Westerners, people with confidence, skinny people, mm, people with IT skills. And these are just a few of the ways that we can think about. And of course, those labels are only part of those people's identities, but we see that the world is built for limited identities. Related back to the lesson that I just recorded on Business for Peace, also people who have a job. This is who the world is built for. So let's swing back to my third point. So, one of the very first things we come with, and it's not just because I teach gender and sexuality, and it's not because I'm a feminazi, because definitely not. But we live in a patriarchal world. There's no way of necessarily denying this. And this means that the world is so patriarchal does not mean that men hate women. It does not mean that individual men are trying to suppress women. That would be a misogynist and not patriarchy. Patriarchy is the system where power comes from. And actually, going back to that book that I'm reading by Rebecca Solnit, she talks about how even our creation stories, so the myths about where humanity came from. So, for example, she's talking with the Christian model that a god creates, and on the seventh day he rests. It's even believed that is written in I believe it's Genesis. I'm not sort of an expert on my Bible, seeing as I am not baptized or christened. I am a heathen. I attend church once a year, and it's on Remembrance Sunday because my father was a soldier, and so it's important for me to, and I don't necessarily see it as religious in that sense, but out of respect for everything that he did. But anyway, that was a tangent, and it's good to know that even talking to myself, I can go on tangents. But where was that? Yeah, Genesis story. That's where I was at. That in the original, it's probably been edited out that there was possibly also a goddess. We speak about Mother Earth, for example. If we look at a lot of the pagan rituals, if we look at religions where there are multiple gods, we have the possibility for feminine to come into that. And actually, talking of that, Krishna, I still need to take a look and see how many transgender gods there are. I will try and look that up and put that in the comments to this. But yeah, so we live in a patriarchal world where you have a god who has been masculinized, because even in the original writings of the Bible, not that any exist now, but I have heard said that he was gender neutral. And now you notice I use the pronoun he because he has been gendered into the masculine. And of course into the masculine white man, which is odd considering that the entire sort of foundations of this are set in the Middle East, where the Caucasian is not a natural skin type or ethnic identity to be found. But anyway, patriarchal world built for men, everything designed around men, power and agency coming through men. This does not mean that then men have an easy time. My father, and I think going back to this book that I recently read on hood feminism, so looking at it more intersectionality, looking at how mainstream feminism does not cater to the to all females. So yeah, my dad, alongside with this, seems to think that he's now in a hard done by minority, and of course I understand he's joking, partly, but everything in the world is designed around this. So, for example, and I know it's a very silly example, but it's an important example. Here is a comparison of the average size of pockets for men and for women. Any woman who has a love of fashion and dresses knows, like, probably the biggest selling point, at least for me, if you find a dress and you're not so sure, and then you took your hands to the side and find out it has pockets, suddenly it's a much better item of clothing, because there's nothing more annoying. I find that at the moment, usually I get to wear different kind of clothes to work, but I've been teaching yoga in the first half, so it's been a lot of sports clothes, and these don't tend to come with pockets, which is frustrating. And okay, could be seen as quite materialistic and superficial, but it does impact. So, for example, then women are forced to carry bags, which are easier to steal, which are more cumbersome to move around with. Don't know if you've ever, of course, been night clubbing, that you want to be able to take your stuff with you, but there's nothing more annoying than having to carry a bag around all the time. You always get those funny memes of women dancing around their handbags. But it's just an inconvenience, and at times can also be very impractical. So that's a silly example, of course, but just showing how the world is designed there. And a more serious example, so when we test the safety of vehicles, they don't use human beings, of course, because that would be very unethical, but they use crash test dummies, and crash test dummies are usually designed around the male body, which means that the scary statistic that women are 47% more likely to be injured in a car accident, because the structure of the body is, of course, different, but car safety design is not tested with female shaped crash dummies. Other things where having a patriarchal world, of course, has hindered and shows that the world is built for males. When we look at supplies for refugee camps, for internally displaced people, very often sanitary products are forgotten about because the people designing and implementing and working in those areas don't have menstruation, so they don't remember about it. In designing school buildings, putting a small amount of unisex toilets may, of course, be very helpful in terms of transgender communities. But if you live in a culture where menstruation is seen as sin and dirty, then it means in those times women and girls cannot go to school because there are not the facilities for them. The reason women could not join the Navy and go into working on submarines for a long time was that they had not designed facilities, so they have only one sleeping area, they have only pissoirs instead of proper toilets, all this kind of thing. So, showing that power and agency and even the physical world is designed around the male body. If we return to this work by Rebecca Solnit, I mean, we've basically divided the world that emotion and nature and all these things that are seen as backward and primitive are associated more with female, and the male world is bring around rationality and the mind and not the body and emotions. So just this whole stereotype leads. It's not to say that there are not matriarchies. There's a beautiful book. I will try and remember the title or search the title and put it in the info box below this video, where there is in China a hidden kingdom where it's still matriarchal, and there are some few other places. It's believed that a lot of African civilizations were, or groups, I hesitate to use the word tribe because of course that puts a particular image in your head. A lot of African groups were actually matriarchal, but when a European came in and colonized, they were not used to speaking to women, and they responded better to the male messengers, and then made the presumption that these male messengers were the one in power, and that is how things started to shift over. So this is all just coming back to that question of who is the world built for? Is it built for men? Again, you can pause me here and think about all the ways in which you think that the world is designed around men, or perhaps how you think it is designed around women. This is, of course, an argument that's rising now, that there is so much focus on feminism and women's rights that men are being forgotten. And it is not to say at all that patriarchy is positive for men. Patriarchy is just as stifling and constructive and toxic for men. That's why we understand things like toxic masculinity now. So none of this is to say that a patriarchal world means that the world is better necessarily for men, but that it is designed around the male body, the masculine agency, the masculine values per se. That is not to say that men have life better because, as I said, toxic masculinity. It's just to say that that is the way that we have built the world. We've built a world on rationality and knowledge and the mind, with emotions and nature and the body being of secondary value. And this then shows another example of patriarchal powers. So, yeah, maybe having a little discussion, just going back there about, as I said, and thinking to yourself, can you think of other examples where the male body, masculine values have been used to build the world that you live in today? So, one of the other values that we spoke about is a world built for white people. A lot of those faces on here probably should be more white men and older men, but European or North American and wealthy. You know, this a world built in this way. I mean, built in this way through colonization. I mean, we took over most of the world. And I say we, I am, of course, a beneficiary of that process. And I think I've talked about this before, how complicated that sits in the descendants, or at least maybe those descendants that have a chance to reflect on it, this whole colonization, because you realize that you profit from something that you do not support. But were you to maybe be asked to go in a time machine and prevent that from happening, how many of us would truly say that we would give up all the privileges of our birth accident, not saying that you weren't wanted, but saying that, you know, that those two people happen to have sex and you entered the world. You know, you could have been anywhere else on the scale, right? It's just an accident of humanity where we come to exist. But yeah, that we have a world built around white, European, North American, and wealthy people, and that no matter how open-minded we might feel that we are, there is some kind of superiority feeling that comes with being Caucasian. There is, you know, a lot of our knowledge. I have not traveled around the world and been to any non-Western universities to know, but it feels like academic knowledge very much comes through whiteness. I'm studying that a lot in my most recent master's on intersectionality. So, again, having a reflect, do you feel like the world is built for white people? And that again is not to say that necessarily because you are Caucasian or light skinned for other reasons that you necessarily have an easy life filled with rainbows and joy and no troubles, but that the world is again designed around this idea that this look, this heritage is somehow superior to other heritages. And again, this is not saying that people who are Caucasian feel like they are superior to others, but that there is a system structured around placing Caucasian and white and light skinned at the top of the hierarchy. I remember having this discussion very often with Kat, a former student. If you ever have the chance to go to the Philippines or to meet her, she's amazing. Now teaching young minds and planting the right seeds and all that wonderful stuff. But she is a slightly darker tone in the Philippines and really feels that this acts as a negative factor. If I think about, for example, the whitening in different makeup products, I mean, is lighter toned, is a move towards white seen as something that adds agency and power in your culture as well? Do you feel like, despite the fact that mixed race is probably going to be the predominant tone, ethnicity, who knows what word you're supposed to use here, in the future? Do you still think that we have built a world around, well, we haven't built a world around white people. Colonization, globalization, those kind of negative events of the past have constructed a world in which white people have more power and agency than other groups. We often hear now, and I don't know if it's the same conversation that's going on internally in the US, but that racism is no longer something that we need to be thinking about, that none of us are racist. And of course, we see that it's happening all over. And I like this quote by Jon Stewart that says, "We have made enormous progress in teaching everyone that racism is bad. Where we seem to have dropped the ball is in teaching people what racism actually is." What are your thoughts on this? Do you think that you know what racism actually is? So it took a little pause there, and of course, if you want more time, just pause me. I mean, please pause me at any time that you wish to, and criticize and critique and come with questions. You know, I I think there's a comment section below the videos. I do not know. I maybe turned it off in an effort not to have trolls that I don't even know expressing negativity, because this is basically just a stopgap method until I can hopefully get back in the classroom soon. But anyway, tangent over. I really don't think that I know what racism is. I am a Caucasian, and I can theoretically and logically understand, but not emotionally. I mean, I cannot compare. So, for example, when I traveled in Ghana, there were a lot of people just asking for money all the time or wanting to marry me for the skin color. And also being critical because of colonial past. And I remember this sat rather difficulty, and it felt uncomfortable and really didn't feel nice to just be seen from the tone of my skin. But I don't think that that is an example of experiencing racism. I mean, maybe on a miniature scale, but I mean, it's also something that I can easily escape from if I go to other environments. It's not something that in the majority of environments I experience, and therefore I don't think that I emotionally and sort of deep down have an understanding. But I want to learn more. It's why I do so much reading, and I should probably do more talking to people, and also do more shutting up and giving space to people. And I've spoken about for a long time, and hopefully Kylie will still have a chance to do this, and some of the other students, that maybe if you are listening to this with someone else, if you are in a group, that you could share like your experiences of racism, because racism is also not a black white issue. It's any issue where your race, and what you classify as your race, has served for someone to discriminate, or be prejudiced against you. So, going back to what I was saying with the talking with Kylie about it, is I think at IPC we often forget that racism also exists between Caucasians or Westerners and those identifying as Asian, Japanese, Korean, Filipino, Vietnamese, Thai, because I really sometimes this overarching Asian is part of that racism, part of that prejudice, where you're grouping people together who are vastly different as individuals, as cultures, and so little understanding for the intersectional identities of these people. So maybe this is a chance to have that conversations and share, even at IPC. I know, of course, going out of the bubble right now is also leading a lot of people to experience racism. If you look slightly Asian, most people cannot tell the difference between different Asian features, being accused of starting coronavirus, even though nobody actually knows. I know we're tracing it back to this market in Wuhan, but probably we could also trace other roots of this, right? There are already 2 streams of this virus going around, so could be any number of factors. So these kinds of racisms that people can experience. So yeah, I would be super interested if any of you have some stories around this, some insights, some thoughts. Please do share. Either send me an email, it's just felicity@ipc.dk, or a message on Facebook, or comment under the video here. I'm really interested in what you think, because it's a subject that I would like to have more knowledge around, but I also experience a lot of fear around that. I might not know what I'm talking about, and how do I move from being, or how do I move into being an ally, and how do you then move from being an ally to being an accomplice? So having that deeper understanding and actually taking actions. I feel like my knowledge is getting better when I hear, I've never found racist jokes funny, but I actually sort of don't even engage in the social laughter around these kinds of issues, because it just doesn't make sense. It's why I have a lot of problems with a lot of comedy, because it's very much about this negativity and putting people down, and it just, I don't know, it doesn't sit in my comedy bone for me. I prefer more lighthearted talking about behaviors rather than attacking cultures. And I'm not saying all comedians do that, but yeah. So that was a very long-winded answer to this idea that we don't actually know what racism is, and that it's not on people that experience it necessarily to educate us. So it might seem ironic that I'm like, please share your stories, educate me, but then I'm also saying it's not your job to. But if you have stuff that you are willing to share, that you do want to talk about, whether you're on the white or the other side, and even that is horrible setup, right? As if there's one side that is white and one side that is other, because there are also so many variations of white and so many intersectional ideas within that. But yeah, long-winded. So here are a couple of exercises that you can do, best done with other people. So first is the bunker exercise, and I'm just going to exit that, and bunker bias, there we go. So I'll just read it out so it's clear, and then again you can pause the screen so that you have the information right there in front of you. There we go. So, and the 2 exercises are very, very similar, so you can choose to do one or the other or both if you so choose. So, imagine that you are under the threat of a nuclear bomb attack, and that you are the owners of the bunker. But there is only room for 5 more people in this underground refuge. There are more than there are many more than 5 people who want to enter. It should be than 5 you want to enter. Here you've got the list of 12 people interested in entering the refuge. Make a selection highlighting the reasons behind the positive and negative reasons for each candidate. So, you have a violoncellist. Are those not 2 different instruments? Anyway, who's 40 and also a drug addict. Doesn't give any information on what drug they are addicted to. You have a lawyer, 25. You have the lawyer's wife, 24, who has just left a mental asylum. Again, we don't know why this person was in the mental asylum. They want to enter both into the refuge or stay outside together. A priest, who's 75. A prostitute, 34. Doesn't necessarily specify whether male or female, so I guess you get to choose. An atheist, 20, who has committed several murders. An atheist is someone who does not believe in God. I always get this wrong because an agnostic is the one that doesn't believe in anything, right? An atheist can be spiritual, or maybe the other way around. A university student that has taken a vow of chastity. Chastity is somebody who abstains from having sex. So again, we don't know whether this is a male or female student. You get to decide. A physicist, 28, who will only enter if he is allowed to take his gun and bring it into the refuge with him. So an armed physicist. A fanatic preacher, 21. A girl of 12 with low IQ. A homosexual, 47. And a Muslim woman of 32 who suffers from epilepsy attacks. So these are the 12 people who are interested in entering. You have to make a choice of 5. I know it's a horrible exercise. You cannot choose that some of you will not stay in the refuge and all 12 people can go in. It's not comfortable. It's not politically correct. It doesn't feel nice. But this is the exercise. See where your discussions take you, if they're internal discussions, whether they are external discussions. And again, I would be super interested to hear who you would take in and who you would not take in. We don't have a lot of information here, so you really are not being asked to make a politically correct decision. It's supposed to tap into your prejudices in some way. Okay. I always feel like when I set horrible exercises like this is not my design either. This is a number of different, these are taken from the internet. Also why they might not, why there are spelling mistakes and different things. But yeah, I usually, when I ask you to do something, I also think that I should do that myself. So who were the 5 people that I would take in? Probably the girl of 12. She is young and has her whole life ahead. I know this is horrible, but this is the end of the world. Probably the university student. Chastity or asexuality or abstinence should not count against a person. I'm not thought about who the 5 people I'm already in there are with, but if we have to start the next human race, then, we don't necessarily need all people doing this. I mean, the 12-year-old is not going to be. So that's 2, right? I have the girl, I have the university student. mm, the lawyer and his wife. So that's 4. I've only got one left. Um, Now it becomes difficult. I'm going to go with the uh, homosexual. Why not build a diverse new community when we're coming? And I don't know who's in the bunker with. But yeah, difficult choice. Reasons why I might not have taken the others. The physicist with the gun, I don't think I would feel safe. It's not part of my reality. I know people are like, yeah, but apocalypse, and if you have to go out and fight for things, maybe the gun is useful. Maybe. The person that's committed several murders, I'm not sure I would feel really safe to be locked up with those. A fanatic preacher, again, would make it very frustrating no matter how long we were in this bunker. It's not that I don't think that people with different viewpoints should be allowed. But yeah, the prostitute and the Muslim woman and the cellist with the drug addiction were also up there. I could easily swap them in for others. The priest at 75 would, I guess, be the counter argument that, yeah, he's already, or they have already lived a long life, and better to leave places for people that will live longer. But of course, it's a nuclear bomb attack. We don't know who's going to live for whatever length. But that was just off the top of my head, and feel free to judge. As I said, probably there are only a few on the list that I personally would have qualms with, and that's the people that have committed murders. And probably actually just the guy that's committed murders. Or girl, whoever it is, the atheist, who has committed several murders, is probably the only one where I would be a little reluctant. Because, I mean, not that people cannot rehabilitate, but yeah, a little scary. So that's exercise number 1. And I'll just leave it here for a second so that if you want to press pause, so that you have this here and you can talk about it. Hopefully you could also do that beforehand so you didn't have all of my rambling about it. So that's the first exercise, and the second exercise is then the who would you live with. And as I said, very, very similar. So you can choose to do one or the other. So yeah, should have said that before, but I'm not editing these videos, that you can go back, or you can do this at another time. So this is the question, who would you live with? Pick your top 3 and the 3 you would least like to live with. So, A single mother with a 3-year-old child whose father is Tunisian. He visits his son occasionally and sometimes brings along friends. A Syrian refugee family with 5 children aged between 1 and 12. A family with a 17-year-old daughter whose father is an accountant in a bank and whose mother is a teacher. A single 70-year-old lady living on a minimal retirement pension. A group of Polish migrants in Romania, all working in a restaurant. Okay. Are you presuming you're in Romania? Sorry, questions for that. But a group of 5 young people living an alternative lifestyle, rejecting the materialistic ideology of consumption. 3 Palestinian students who are politically engaged. An American couple without children. Husband is working in the embassy. Wife is taking care of the household and 3 dogs. 2 African artists who live a bohemian lifestyle and have many artist friends. A girl who is studying piano and needs to practice regularly in the afternoons. A group of 3 students who love rap music and video. And there you get to pick the top three you would like to live with and the three you would least like to live with. And for this one, you can do it by yourself, and then you can try imagining maybe together with a small group that you're already living in this location. And you have to agree, of course, to the people that would move in. Who would I like to live with? I think the 70-year-old lady, I think she would have some interesting stories to tell, but also want her own space. And yeah, it's nicer than being in a home, maybe. The three Palestinian students that are politically engaged wouldn't necessarily need to be Palestinian students, but I think that would lead to some interesting information coming in. And again, the same with the young people living an alternative lifestyle. The ones that I would least like to live with are probably any of those that bring lots of their friends with them. I like my private space. I like my space to be somewhere where I can close the doors and not invite the rest of the world in. So those would probably be my least. And I think the ones that I chose for the most, they would probably be because I think they have interesting stories to tell, things that I could learn, but there are also maybe people that are not in the house so much. Maybe that's also it, so that I have my space, because this would all be on the proviso that there are rooms that I can close and just be mine. So I think maybe it's the moving around a lot in your life that those spaces become super important. So yeah, that's exercise number 2, and a possibility to see then who you like in the world around you. And now we have a little TED Talk by a bias and prejudice expert. I think I've mentioned this one a few times. I find it really interesting, and yeah, enjoy.
I was on a long road trip this summer, and I was having a wonderful time listening to the amazing Isabella Wilkerson's Warmth of Other Suns. It documents 6 million Black folks fleeing the South from 1915 to 1970, looking for a respite from all the brutality and trying to get to a better opportunity up north. And it was filled with stories of the resilience and the brilliance of African Americans. And it was also really hard to hear all the stories of the horrors and the humility and all of the humiliations. It was especially hard to hear about the beatings and the burnings and the lynchings of Black men. And I said, this is a little deep. I need a break. I'm going to turn on the radio. I turned it on, and there it was. Ferguson, Missouri. Michael Brown. 18-year-old Black man, unarmed, shot by a white police officer, laid on the ground, dead, blood running for 4 hours while his grandmother and little children and his neighbors watched in horror. And I thought, here it is again. This violence, this brutality against Black men has been going on for centuries. I mean, it's the same story. It's just different names. I mean, it could have been Amadou Diallo. It could have been Sean Bell. It could have been Oscar Grant. It could have been Trayvon Martin. This violence, this brutality is really something that's part of our national psyche. It's part of our collective history. What are we going to do about it? You know, that part of us that still crosses the street, locks the doors, clutches the purses when we see young Black men, that part. I mean, I know we're not shooting people down in the street, but I'm saying that the same stereotypes and prejudices that fuel those kinds of tragic incidents are in us. We've been schooled in them as well. I believe that we can stop these types of incidents, these Fergusons, from happening by looking within and being willing to change ourselves. So I have a call to action for you. There are 3 things that I want to offer us today to think about as ways to stop Ferguson from happening again. 3 things that I think will help us reform our images of young Black men. 3 things that I'm hoping will not only protect them, but will open the world so that they can thrive. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine our country embracing young Black men, seeing them as part of our future, giving them that kind of openness, that kind of grace we give to people we love? How much better would our lives be? How much better would our country be? Let me just start with number 1. We got to get out of denial. We don't need... Stop trying to be good people. We need real people. You know, I do a lot of diversity work, and people will come up to me at the beginning of a workshop. They're like, "Oh, Miss Diversity Lady, we're so glad you're here. But we don't have a bias bone in our body." And I'm like, really? Because I do this work every day, and I see all my biases. I mean, not too long ago, I was on a plane, and I heard the voice of a woman pilot coming over the PA system, and I was just like so excited. I was so thrilled. I was like, yes, women, we are rocking it. We are now in the stratosphere, you know? It was all good, and then it started getting turbulent and bumpy, and I was like, I hope she can drive. I know, right, but it is not even like I knew that was a bias until I was coming back on the other leg. There's always a guy driving, and it's often turbulent and bumpy, and I've never questioned the competence of the male driver. The pilot, it's good. Now, here's the problem. It's like, if you ask me explicitly, I would say, female pilot, awesome. But it appears that when things get funky and a little troublesome, a little risky, I lean on a bias that I didn't even know that I had. You know, fast-moving planes in the sky, I want a guy. That's my default. Men are my default. Who is your default? Who do you trust? Who are you afraid of? Who do you implicitly feel connected to? Who do you run away from? I'm going to tell you what we have learned. The implicit association test, which measures unconscious bias. You can go online and take it. 5 million people have taken it. Turns out our default is white. We like white people. We prefer white. What do I mean by that? When people are shown images of Black men and white men, we are more quickly able to associate that picture with a positive word, that white person with a positive word, than we are when we are trying to associate positive with a Black face. And vice versa. When we see a Black face, it's easier for us to connect Black with negative than it is white with negative. 70% of white people taking that test prefer white. 50% of Black people taking that test prefer white. You see, we were all outside when the contamination came down. What do we do about the fact that our brain automatically associates? You know, one of the things that you probably are thinking about, and you're probably like, you know what? I'm just gonna double down on my color blindness. Yes, recommit to that. I'm gonna suggest to you, no. We've gone about as far as can go trying to make a difference, trying to not see color. The problem was never that we saw color. It was what we did when we saw the color. It's a false ideal. And while we're busy pretending not to see, we are not being aware of the ways in which racial difference is changing people's possibilities. It's keeping them from thriving, and sometimes it's causing them an early death. So, in fact, what the scientists are telling us is no way. Don't even think about colorblindness. In fact, what they're suggesting is stare at awesome Black people. Look at them directly in their faces and memorize them, because when we look at awesome folks who are Black, it helps to dissociate the association that happens automatically in our brain. Why do you think I'm showing you these beautiful Black men behind me? There were not enough. There were so many, I had to cut them. Okay, so here's the thing. I'm trying to reset your automatic associations about who Black men are. I'm trying to remind you that young Black men grow up to be amazing human beings who have changed our lives and made them better. So here's the thing.
I'm just gonna pause for a second here. Sorry if you can hear banging in the background. Ola's searching for something in the loft, which is above this room. Or if you can hear the fan of the computer, because it's like, what are you trying to make me do? But I think this is a beautiful and clear notion that the speaker comes with, that to look into the face of our biases. And again, I would suggest this as a nice exercise in these weeks, that wherever you feel a prejudice, whether it is, for example, a lot of prejudice against young people right now, that they're not taking this coronavirus seriously, then look for faces like Slattenboy, the guy who made the garbage collector in the Pacific Ocean, of young people who've saved the world by themselves. I totally get reminded every day and see awesomeness in all of your faces. It's also why I miss being there, and why I really maybe need to work on my social awkwardness, because when I get a chance to talk to some of you one-on-one, I don't talk a lot personally necessarily in the classes, because of the social awkwardness. But when I use professional excuses like Living Library, like working together on lessons, to actually hear your viewpoints. And it's always such an eye-opener and a pleasure and a reminding and resetting of this prejudice that we have. You know, so many of you speak about perhaps how bad your English is and that you don't understand. And I'd like you also, in some senses, to reset that as to how bad my skills are in allowing you to understand, in allowing you to participate in a way that is comfortable. I think this is an amazing idea, and I would love if you have some people that are inspirational to you, if you wanted to share those people. I have a young person, I don't know if they're super well known and you're all like, oh yeah, know that person, but I, for example, once did a lesson on setting up an inspiration library, and I think that's something that could be great to do at IPC. Maybe now, where you have time, you could take some good old fashioned paper and pen, or even in the Facebook group, as Bonnie has started to do, make an inspiration library of people that helped you challenge your view about different things, about possibilities, about what you could create, about your biases for different groups. In sort of widespread culture of people that I don't know, Tavi Gevinson, who is a young feminist editor of Rookie magazine and podcast, is incredibly inspirational for me, somebody at such a, so much younger than me in ages. I love Ashley Graham's podcast called Pretty Big Deal. There are videos of it on YouTube, or you find it where you find your podcasts. And she speaks to people from all different walks of life. Inspirational in terms of who we have at the school or former students. My goodness, it seems like such a long time ago since I saw people's faces. Of course, you have three people that take really good care of you, Gila and Michelle and Philip, who really challenge different stereotypes in different ways. Gila is such a representation of convictions and persistence and a willingness to learn. When I compare, and I'm sorry to do this, Gila, because probably you spend your whole life compared, but I have, of course, worked together with Hadass, her twin sister, who was also incredibly inspirational in terms of being an activist and speaking out about these stories, and her experiences with the Israeli state. And what I learned so much from Gila, for example, is, as I said, this convictions of knowing where you want to go in life, what kind of person and values you want to have, and sticking to this, and an enormous openness to learn, to listen to other people, to be open-minded, to reflect on her own life. And with Philip, how he uses his perhaps social crutches. He's a socially awkward person like myself, but how he uses and challenges those for a positive, right? So here you have an example of somebody who's socially awkward, but he's also giving you an image of somebody who desires to be of service whichever way they can, who challenges that idea with different levels of excitement and motivation, and puts themselves in that position. And then Michelle, of course, who is just a huge heart. I mean, they all are, but really that's those values. And I know bits and pieces of the story, and I'm so looking forward to being able to hear more. But here's an example of someone who's highly educated, highly motivated, but has not left their emotional intelligence behind, who uses their obstacles to help other people overcome those, who has a huge capacity to listen, which is an amazing skill human beings have. So again, sort of could be stereotype images. There's a lot of prejudice against the Polish throughout Europe. There's a lot of prejudice around Israelis throughout the world, and Brazilians given a particular image. And then three people that help set and destroy and recalibrate those images in some way. So It's also just a praise to those three wonderful people who are taking good care of you. But yeah, maybe decorating the walls of IPC with inspirational people who will help challenge this conception that Koreans are this way, women are that way, socially awkward people are this way, intelligent people are this way, not so intelligent people are this way, people that suffer from a mental condition are this way. You know, things that you can do to challenge that biases, that the bias that you have. I'm talking American. Now we're going to go back to the video.
The other possibility in science, and it's only temporarily changing our automatic assumptions, but one thing we know is that if you take a white person who is like odious, that you know, and stick it up next to a person of color, a black person who's fabulous, then that sometimes actually causes us to disassociate too. So, you know, think like Jeffrey Dahmer and Colin Powell, like just stare at them, right? But these are the things. So go looking for your bias. Please just get out of denial and go looking for disconfirming data that will prove that, in fact, your old stereotypes are wrong. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, what I'm going to say is move toward young black men instead of away from them. And, you know, it's not the hardest thing to do, but it's also... It's one of these things where you have to be conscious and intentional about it. You know, I was on a Wall Street area one time, like maybe several years ago, and I was with a colleague of mine, and she's really wonderful, and she does diversity work with me, and she's a woman of color, she's Korean, and we were outside, it was late at night, and we were sort of wondering where we were going, we were lost, and I saw this person across the street, and I was thinking, oh, great black guy. You know, I was going toward him without even thinking about it. And she was like, oh, that's interesting. The guy across the street, you know, he was a black guy. I think, you know, black guys generally know where they're going. Like, I don't know why exactly I think that, but this is what I think. Okay, so she was saying, oh, you were going, yay, black guy? She said, I was going, black guy. Other direction. Same need, same guy, same clothes, same time, same street. Different reaction. And she said, I feel so bad. I'm a diversity consultant. I did the black guy thing. I'm a woman of color. Oh my God. And I said, you know what? Please, we really need to relax about this. I mean, you got to realize I go way back with black guys. My dad is a black guy. You see what I'm saying? I got a 6'5" black guy son. I was married to a black guy. My black guy thing is so wide and so deep that I can pretty much sort and figure out who that black guy is. And he was my black guy. He said, ladies, I know where you're going. I'll take you there. You know, biases are the stories we make up about people before we know who they actually are. But how are we going to know who they are when we've been told to avoid and be afraid of them? So I'm going to tell you to walk toward your discomfort. And I'm not asking you to take any crazy risks. I'm saying just do an inventory. Expand your social and professional circles. Just like, who's in your circle? Who's missing? How many authentic relationships do you have with young black people, folks, men, women, or any other major difference from who you are and how you roll, so to speak? Because you know what? You know, there may be, just look around your periphery. There may be somebody at work, in your classroom, in your house of worship, somewhere. There's some black young guy there. And you're nice. You say hi. I'm saying go deeper, closer, further. And build the kinds of relationships, the kinds of friendships that actually cause you to see the holistic person and to really go against the stereotypes. I know some of you are out there, I know, because I have some white friends in particular, they will say, you have no idea how awkward I am. Like, I don't think this is going to work for me. I'm sure I'm going to blow this. Okay, maybe, but this thing is not about perfection. It's about connection. And you're not going to get comfortable before you get uncomfortable. I mean, you just have to do it. And young black men, what I'm saying is, if someone comes your way genuine and authentically, take the invitation. Not everyone is out to get you. Go looking for those people who can see your humanity. You know, it's the empathy and the compassion that comes out of having relationships with people who are different from you. Something really powerful and beautiful happens. You start to realize that they are you, that they're part of you, that they are in your family. And then we cease to be bystanders and we become actors, we become advocates, and we become allies. So go away from your comfort into a bigger, brighter thing, because that is how we will stop another Ferguson from happening. That's how we create a community where everybody, especially young Black men, can thrive. So this last thing is going to be harder, and I know it, but I'm just going to put it out there anyway. When we see something, we have to have the courage to say something, even to the people we love. You know, it's holidays, and it's going to be a time when we're sitting around the table and having a good time with many of us anyway. We'll be in holidays. And, you know, you got to listen to the conversations around the table. Start to say things like, Grandma's a bigot. Uncle Joe is racist. And you know, we love Grandma and we love Uncle Joe. We do. We know they're good people. But what they're saying is wrong. And we need to be able to say something, because you know who else is at the table? The children are at the table. And we wonder why these biases don't die and move from generation to generation, because we're not saying anything. We got to be willing to say, Grandma, we don't call people that anymore. Uncle Joe, it isn't true that he deserved that. No one deserves that. And we've got to be willing to not shelter our children from the ugliness of racism when Black parents don't have the luxury to do so, especially those who have young Black sons. We got to take our lovely darlings, our future, and we got to tell them we have an amazing country with incredible ideals. We have worked incredibly hard and we have made some progress, but we are not done. We still have in us this old stuff about superiority, and it is causing us to embed those further into our institutions and our society and generations, and it is making for despair and disparities and a devastating devaluing of young Black men. We still struggle, you have to tell them, with seeing both the color and the character of young Black men. But that you expect them to be part of the forces of change in this society that will stand against injustice and is willing, above all other things, to make a society where young Black men can be seen for all of who they are. So many amazing Black men, those who are the most amazing statesmen that have ever lived, brave soldiers, awesome, hardworking laborers. These are people who are powerful preachers. They are incredible scientists and artists and writers. They are dynamic comedians. They are doting grandpas, caring sons. They are strong fathers, and they are young men with dreams of their own. Thank you.
And of course, she makes getting into uncomfortable spaces sound inviting. Um, and I guess, I mean, that for me is the huge power of this TED Talk as well, that she invites in. She doesn't force, she doesn't push. She invites in and says, "Hey, this is the only way. If we how can we expect to make a better world if we don't get uncomfortable in the one that we're in?" You know, when I said before that I did not necessarily know if I say before, I think it was in a no, I think it was in this PowerPoint. Sorry, super long talking, but that I didn't know if I could really know what racism is. And yeah, that means you need to get uncomfortable. Again, here could be a little sharing exercise where you can describe a situation where you felt discriminated against, or a situation where you discriminated against someone, a, a situation where you witnessed an act of discrimination and did not do anything, or a situation where you witnessed an act of discrimination and did something and interfered, as it says here. So, a good point to stop the presentation, to have a think about, to talk to other people about, if you're there, if you're listening with other people. Because, as she said, I think the way that we combat this world built around any kind of xenophobic, racist, white, patriarchal ideal is to face on those bias and those prejudice that we face, and to see where they are and look at them and feel uncomfortable in them, and then find a way to move on to do better next time. This is not in her talk, but it's in another interesting concept. I'm just going to, yeah, I'm going to take this slide and the next one, and then I'm going to pause and make a second presentation because I think this one is also already pretty long. So this is, what is the ticking bomb in your society? The invisible bias made visible. So ticking bomb is something that has a potential to explode at some point, and also has the potential to be, oh, what do they call it? Wow, brain is not working. You detonate, or you know, like in the oh my goodness, everything is gone from my mind. But you have the possibility to stop it before it goes off. There's a proper word for this. And so to have a reflection. So if I think about my society, it's not so invisible, but it is also invisible in a sense. Xenophobia, nobody, as she said in the video, would directly say, "Hey, I don't like foreigners." But Brexit, comments made around the dinner table, you know, I have had my parents say to me, "You're not that kind of immigrant." These kind of things, they show that ticking bomb of this. I think also against a lack of academic intelligence. There really is this academic snobbery in my country, where people that have a university degree are seen as much more valuable, much more able to give something to society than those that have not. So these would be two examples of an invisible bias that I can make visible in that sense. Ableism, which I'm going to talk about in the next part of this presentation, is another one of those. Ableism being prejudice and bias against people who are differently able, so people in wheelchairs, people with mental diagnoses, all these kind of things, again seen as less than human in many ways. And this, of course, is a potential for things to go horribly wrong. If people are being oppressed because of this, people's lives are being made more difficult because of this. So H.G. Wells says, "Our true nationality is mankind." Humankind, if you prefer. You can put the human in there. Let me see. I haven't got to play with these tools for a little bit. We can put humankind. The mankind. How credible is this? Do you think it is naive and idealistic that we could live in a world where we saw one another as humans first? That we were able, of course, to have our intersectional identities, but that we are able to see people as humans first. Now, I have no idea how long this has been, so I'm going to, as I said, split this presentation. So I'm going to stop this now and upload it, and then I'm going to speak to the other half of this. So they'll be connected about who, going back to that question of who is this world built for? Yeah, and I really would love to hear your thoughts on whether seeing one another as human first and others and all other identities second, is this a positive thing? Is this a credible thing? What difference would it actually make that in some sense there was that equality of human, and is that not going far enough? Do we need to see living as opposed to non-living? Yeah, what are your thoughts? And thank you for listening. Thank you for the patience. Hope this brought something interesting, that it gives some interesting discussions. There's a few exercises and questions throughout that you can pause and think about, and I'm always interested in your answers. Take care, and thanks for listening.